Hey everyone, and welcome to episode number 16 of the Nerd Federation podcast. I am your host, Will Hernandez, and I'm here with your weekly podcast about some things pro wrestling and video game related. And I'm feeling good about this week's episode for a variety of reasons. Mostly because I feel like we're coming off this high from AEW Revolution on Sunday. It was probably maybe AEW's best pay-per-view that it's ever done, potentially. I don't know. I have to go back and think about that because I've watched every single AEW pay-per-view except for one, and that was All Out last year. I'm sorry, Double or Nothing last year, because I just wasn't really feeling what they were doing for that card. And it was a kind of form of protest because I didn't like the direction that AEW was going in at the time. And here we are almost 10 months later, and I think AEW has found its way again. So I'm recording on a Tuesday night. It's March 5th, which is insane that we're in March already. It's a stormy Tuesday night. It's raining here in the Mid-Hudson Valley. It's going to be a crappy day tomorrow. But as you noticed, I've already changed things for this episode. There's no intro like I had last week. That did nothing. So I feel like, let me just go back to the way things were. And I'm really gonna jump into it this week because I'm recording early for a reason. I just wanna honestly, I just hit my my little microphone thing there, my noise gate. I wanted to just get this out of the way, not because I'm really in a rush, but listen, I want a game. I am deep into Final Fantasy XVI right now. I'm almost 3/4 of the way through the game. So I'm going to talk about that later on in this show. But I thought the quicker I record this podcast, the quicker I can get to actually gaming. And, I said I was going to go into this right away talking about Revolution. And I just said how I think AEW has found its way. And that's not to say that there still aren't problems. There are supposedly, reportedly, depending on who you want to believe and which way the wind is blowing on any given day, issues backstage. And I know heading into the recording of this podcast, I found out that Sammy Guevara is supposedly suspended because of the way the Jeff Hardy situation was handled, where Sammy apparently didn't follow concussion protocol during that match, and instead of going right to the finish, they just cut the match going, and that wasn't supposed to be the case. I don't know. I'm not going to get into that because honestly, I'm not prepared to talk about that at all because I just found out about it maybe about a half an hour before I hit the record button for this week. So I'm not going to get into that, but there were rumblings of issues heading into this show. And we did see over the weekend Miro with his response to the Meat Madness match getting canceled, and people were upset with him because this past weekend was supposed to be all about Sting and Sting's final pro wrestling match. So that got a little bit out of hand. Then fans aren't happy with the direction of certain wrestlers like Jay White, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. The women's division is still a bit of a mess, even though I think in some ways it kind of is heading in the right direction, and I will get into that later. I think overall, if you look at things for AEW, I think things are heading in the right direction. And Tony Khan continuously says that AEW is going to have a big March. And we saw earlier today how he tweeted out, or AEW tweeted out, the new logo. There's going to be a new set design on Wednesday. They are having Dynamite down in Georgia on Wednesday. Shout out to my buddy Eric, who is supposedly going to that show. Whether he's seating front row, is TBD. I'll let y'all know next week. They're going to record Collision this week on Thursday, same arena. A little bit of saturation, I think, for the market. Let's see what the response is for tickets there. But it seems like things are heading in the right direction. Kind of funny how that started happening when a certain tattooed, straight edge wrestler from Chicago was fired from the company. But I digress. Anyway, going back to Revolution this past Sunday, was it AEW's best pay-per-view? Maybe. I would argue Revolution 2020 in Chicago, which I attended, might have been the better overall, stronger show. But this one comes close. I would have to actually go back and watch these shows again. But this particular show is up there considering the matches on the card, considering it was Sting's retirement match, considering the place was sold out. You had just over 16,000 people at the Greensboro Coliseum in North Carolina. And you had a lot of people watching this show, more so than I think usual. There were probably a lot of extra eyes on this show because it was Sting's last match. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that in different places. And I'll get to that in a minute. Looking back at the show, this is a rare thing that I do, but I am going to kind of go through things a little bit match by match. But I'll first say that there were really only two weak points in the pay-per-view. One, the All-Star Scramble, and the women's title match, which in itself I think is a bit disappointing. Look, we know who's coming to AEW. Mercedes Moné is on her way. I'll actually be in Boston going to that show, and the Boston show. And my brother, he texted me right before that women's title match on Sunday between Timeless Toni Storm and Deonna Purrazzo and said that this match has to be good. And I thought about that. I thought that maybe that was an exaggeration. But after thinking about it, I think he was right in some ways. The match started out well, but then kind of deteriorated from there. Tony won with the help of some outside interference, and I think a lot of people believed that match should have been more than what it was. I mean, that was the overwhelming thing that I saw on social media when I kind of went back and looked at some things and what people were saying. I think people were saying more, were expecting more, and I think some people are a little bit critical of the character work in a match, because the Timeless Toni Storm character is great. The issue might be that I saw some people say, and I do tend to agree, is that it's hard to work that character in an actual wrestling match because she has to kind of be, I don't know. There's ups and downs, I think, with that character in an actual match. But, and I'll get into it right now, I'm curious to see where the women's division goes from here, because we know Mercedes is on her way, right? Britt Baker is likely on her way back. Storm is still the champ. Purrazzo is going to be a factor. Thunder Rosa and Deeb are back from injuries. Then you have the younger wrestlers in Julia Hart and Sky Blue making noise. And you have Willow and Statlander doing their thing. So that's 10 wrestlers right there that you can build a division around. Really, you have 10 really talented female wrestlers that you can build that division around. And that's not even counting Saraya or Ruby Soho or Mariah May. That's not even counting those folks. And then you have a Queen Aminata who's been the upstart and has been busy in Ring of Honor right now. And there's still Athena's lurking. You're stacked. That division is stacked. So the question now is, can Tony and the new writer, Jennifer Pepperman, bring all of this stuff together? That's gonna be a real big question that's gonna have to be answered. And I think we're gonna start getting answers when Mercedes debuts in a couple of weeks. Actually, next week in Boston. So TBD on that. As for the rest of the show, I do have thoughts I wanted to go through, and I actually posted them on nerdfederationpodcast.com. That's a plug right there. I finally did the whole pod page thing and got the website, got that website going. So I'm going to start from the beginning and kind of go from there and kind of just give my thoughts on things. I think AEW fans want to see better for Jay White, which is why he got the reaction he did at 0 Hour. He said we're going to see him in Boston after that match was over. And later on we learned that he's going to be wrestling Darby Allin. More on him later. So maybe he's Okada's first feud. And I could be speaking out of turn here, but pretty sure bet that Okada's going to be debuting. I guess maybe re-debuting is how you want to look at it. With AEW this Wednesday. I think if you make Okada's first opponent, first feud with Jay White, that gets instantly get Okada more comfortable right away in AEW. Because you're trying to ease Okada into this American style of pro wrestling, this weekly episodic television that you have to deal with here. They don't have that in Japan. That's not the way things work in Japan. So this is going to be a lot different for Okada, and I think working with a Jay White will help. I think people are a little tired of this Bang Bang Scissor Gang storyline, and I think a lot of people believe, are vocal about the fact that they don't like the way Jay White is being used. I don't personally like it either, but you have to take a step back and kind of see what was happening with the main event scene in AEW, and now things might sort of reset on Wednesday, today when you're listening to this. So again, it's going to be kind of interesting to kind of see how things play out. Championship match, TNT championship match between Christian Cage and Daniel Garcia. And it is crazy to think that Christian Cage at 50 years old and 29 years in pro wrestling is doing the best work of his career. Think about that for a second. Think about the experience that man has. And I feel like I can confidently say he is doing the best work of his career. It's amazing. This patriarchy thing is just, it's amazing. And the way he carries himself to the ring and in his matches just really adds to the whole presentation that he has going on right now. And that was really a great match to start the show, as Christian retained and is still the TNT champion. And we still don't know what's going on with Adam Copeland. He's definitely selling that concerto. So I have a feeling that Adam showing up on Dynamite on Wednesday to continue this months-long storyline with Christian Cage. Again, apparently AEW does not know how to do storytelling. That's what I've been told. That's what the internet says. Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson for the Continental Crown. I like the way they introduced this match, and it was something different. And I saw a lot of... I might as well get into this now a little bit. There are some of these Twitter accounts, X accounts out there that are so pro AEW that they cannot see the faults in it for the life of them. And it's getting real annoying. And I get that they defend these companies like it's their job. And I've talked about this before. You got the AEW fanboys defending AEW like it's their job. Same thing with the WWE fanboys. On the other side of things, same thing with PlayStation and the same thing with the Xbox folks. They defend these companies like their lives depend on it. And somebody made the comment, oh, here comes AEW. They're just transitioning into matches one after another. They're not wasting any time talking, but they're still giving you a little bit of story with the way they did this introduction to the match. Because they're shitting on what what WWE did, especially at the Hell in a Cell, not Hell in a Cell, Jesus, Elimination Chamber in Australia. And the 40-minute promo by The Rock on Friday SmackDown. Y'all need to just stop with the comparisons because it's getting a little annoying. It really is. I've had to start muting people, and there are two offenders out there that I'm not even gonna name, but just stop, man. Listen, I support and enjoy AEW as much as the next person, maybe as much as you guys, but I am fair, I think, in my criticism of the product and the shortcomings of the product. Yes, it's great that AEW just goes into match. But I will say a good video package goes a long fucking way into introducing a story, especially when you have a pay-per-view that had a lot of new eyes on the product. And again, second time I've mentioned that. I will get into that at the end of my Revolution impressions. Anyway, I thought that Danielson and Kingston was going to be the match of the night until later. And you know what happens later. It really was great stuff all around, and the crowd fucking ate that match up. That is just like, I have a feeling that particular crowd, it is old WCW country, old Jim Crockett Promotions country, NWA. I think they really did appreciate that hard-hitting style of match and technical wrestling that only really those two can provide. Not really only, but you know what I mean. Those two guys really went all out with Kingston picking up the win and retaining. I tell you, man, Danielson, he's been putting over a lot of dudes. Like, you can never say that guy is worried about taking pins and not being over. That dude is taking jobs, is doing the jobs. And he should be at this point in his career. That's a big difference, I think, between guys like Danielson and people like, I don't know, Punk, maybe. You hear a lot about the older guys not wanting to do the job, so the younger folks are putting people over, but Danielson's putting people over right and left, and it's great. It's great to see. I did not like the scramble match. Should have been an elimination style match, and they should have did that on Dynamite. That's all I'm going to say about that. Wardlow wins. He's got his title match now against Samoa Joe. We'll see how that goes, but I don't know. I just wasn't there was just, for me, there was just no point to that match. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel. Anyway, so I said on Threads going into this next match for the International Championship that I thought that Cassidy was losing. And I'm actually wearing my Orange Cassidy shirt right now. So I thought he was losing going in. And I didn't think that was necessarily a bad thing. So, I mean, they set that up perfectly. Broderick Strong had the advantage for most of the match. Orange had the taped up ribs with the Keysology tape. I know I said that wrong. So they played it perfectly. And Roderick, it was a beatdown. It was really a beatdown and really the end of an era, I think, for Orange. Do I think that he needs to go away for a little bit? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, the guy's over. He really is. But I'm starting to see people in the IWC are getting a little tired of Orange. Listen, we knew that's the beauty of like the way Tony Khan introduced Orange Cassidy to actually like wrestling matches. And I was there when he had his first official match in AEW against Pac at Revolution 2020. That was a great moment, I think. And people don't think about that, but that was just, people were so fucking excited to finally see him mix it up in the ring in AEW. By the way, speaking of Pac, nice little vignette there in the pre-show, and he's coming back. That's going to be really interesting to see in the future. God, him and Ospreay, holy fuck. Woof, I can't wait. Anyway, so post-match that international, I want to keep on calling it Intercontinental, international title match was that Kyle O'Reilly showed up post-match. He hugged it out with Roderick Strong, but he refused to put on that Undisputed Kingdom shirt when he was offered it. So stay tuned for that little storyline. It's too bad that Bobby Fish left under the circumstances that he did last year. Was it last year? God, it seems so long ago. It would have been good to kind of see an Undisputed, what the hell did they call themselves? Oh my God, I can't even remember. That's how much wrestling I feel like I've probably forgotten more wrestling than people have watched in their lives. So anyway, FTR versus BCC. That match got better as it went along, and again, it was your really like throwback, I thought, tag team match. And I think the crowd appreciated that at times. Again, a little slow to begin with. It was kind of a clusterfuck to start. I would say the first 5 to 8 minutes, but then things really started picking up as you went along. Dax bleeds. It wasn't Mox. It was Dax, and those guys ended up tapping out. Dax ended up tapping out in the end as he's pouring blood from his forehead. And listen, again, FTR is another team that is not afraid to do the jobs because they're fucking over. You don't have to worry about that. It seems like when you are over with the crowd, you do not need to worry about losing any type of momentum when you lose a match. Like, I don't understand where it did. That whole, it's that old school mentality of you lose on TV, you're losing a lot of your mojo. I don't think that's the case. You think Danielson's losing his mojo because he lost to Eddie Kingston? I just don't think that's the case. Anyway, I already went over Storm and Peraza. Listen, it was a letdown. I thought AEW did a great job with the build to this match, and I think it says a lot about the Tony Storm character. But the match was just, I don't know, it just never really meshed well. And I wonder what happened there. I talked about that earlier. Obviously, I'm not going to get into it again. Now, whew, I really wanted today to go back and watch the Ospreay Takeshita match, because that match fucking stole the show. I've watched a good number of Ospreay matches since I started watching New Japan 6-7 years ago. He's put on a lot of bangers. I don't think this was the best one, because I think his matches with Omega were better. But this is up there, man. These guys, there was such a fluidity with this match, for the most part, because there was that one mistake that Takeshita had, that he was going for that brainbuster brainbuster. Turnbuckle brainbuster. Jesus. That turnbuckle brainbuster that, I don't know if he just like let go early or what, but like Ospreay ended up like scraping his lower back on the rope instead, and had this fucking wicked rope burn on his lower right side of his back. It looked really bad. Like, you thought that Ospreay broke his lower back. I mean, honestly, that's what it looked like. Anyway, I mean, listen, go back and watch it again, or if you haven't watched it, watch it for the first time, because that match was fucking amazing. Those guys went all out. The transitions into some of the offensive moves were just fucking amazing. There's one thing that I saw somebody say on Threads, how there was no story told during the match, which, I'm sorry, but I think that's bullshit. The story was that these two guys were trying to outdo each other because they're in the same fucking faction. How was that not a story? How was that not obvious? That was the way I viewed it. That these two guys are so competitive that they're in the Don Callis family, that they're trying to one up each other. And they pulled out all the stops to try to one up each other. That, to me, is the story. I could be wrong. Somebody out there could correct me, but I feel that was the story that was being told in that match. And they did a hell of a job telling it. They really did. And that crowd was fucking into it, man. They had 3 to 4 standing ovations during that match. That's crazy. I think that's crazy. I don't feel like we get that enough. And that crowd was really appreciative of what they were watching. I'll be curious. I mean, how do you follow that up with Kyle Fletcher on Wednesday? You're going to have Ospreay versus Fletcher on Wednesday. I guess Fletcher got his visa problems finally figured out. So, I mean, Ospreay can't go this hard all the time, right? I know he's going to want to. And that was like the one thing I was worried about watching this match. And I was kind of sort of proven right, but it was really Takeshita that kind of had the mistake there. I thought that they were going to go so hard that somebody was going to get themselves hurt. And it happened, but not in the way that I thought. But those guys were really like beating the shit out of each other. Remember how I talked about last week about the suspension of belief when I was watching that Finlay Nick Nemeth match? The same thing was happening here. Takeshita and Ospreay were beating the shit out of each other. It really made you stop and wonder, wow, are these guys really fucking each other up? Obviously they weren't, but man, they were laying shit in, which is great. Listen, say what you want about Vince, but Vince always said, make it look real. You got to make it look real. And those guys made that fucking match look real. Okay. Samoa Joe retained the AEW World title in the three-way with Hangman, Adam Page, and Swerve Strickland. I don't think Joe winning was much of a surprise for a couple of reasons. I know that people want to see Swerve win the title. I get that. But that needs to happen on a show where all the attention is on him so it can be properly celebrated. And Sunday wasn't the time. Sunday was not the time with Sting as the main event and his retirement match. So that just wasn't the time to do that. So now you got to look at doing this at Double or Nothing is what I'm guessing. Because I don't think you come back now and have Swerve challenge again for the title. He kind of, quote unquote, goes to the back of the line with the rankings. We shall see how that all plays out. But here's a chance now to kind of use the rankings as a storytelling device where, I don't know, Swerve drops down to maybe 2 or 3. Wardlow shoots up to like number 1 because he won the match. And then you kind of, again, like I said, use that as a storytelling device because now Swerve has to fight his way back to the 1 or 2 spot to challenge Joe again. And Joe gets an extended reign with the title, which I think is rightly deserved. It was too soon for him to lose the title. My brother pointed it out to me. He was like, yeah, you're right. It was too soon. And he's probably not yet ready to go film season 2 of the Twisted Metal show. I'm assuming that's coming, maybe during the summertime. So maybe it does make sense for him to hold it until Double or Nothing. That gives you a 5-month reign with the title. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think, and again, I think Joe deserves that. He deserves that recognition. Main event. I guess it was what I was expecting in many ways, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't know. I'm of two minds of the fact that Sting and Darby won. And I'll say why. Because tradition dictates that you do the job on the way out, right? We saw that with Undertaker. We saw that with Ric Flair in WWE, even though he wrestled. Let's not get into that. Right? We've seen this happen over and over again. You do the job on the way out. That didn't happen today. I should say Sunday. And I think it was meant to right wrongs from the past, obviously with WWE and the way that whole thing went down. And I know Sting is lamented about the missed opportunity of having a match with The Undertaker, but he would have not been afforded the same opportunity and luxury of what happened on Sunday with WWE. AEW turned out to be the perfect swan song for Sting because Tony Khan has a massive respect for Sting. Say what you want about Tony Khan, and I say it too, but he treated Sting really fucking well during this run. It's a shame we never really saw the singles match because he just, you weren't going to do that with Sting. But he had a hell of a run in AEW. And they handled his whole retirement thing with grace and class and dignity. It was the complete opposite of WWE when you think about it. And I thought it was funny that on Monday, all of a sudden you had WWE giving kudos to Sting on air. But yet they couldn't provide 30 to 45 seconds of footage from their fucking massive library for that. Because WWE owns all that footage. They own all that old footage when they bought the WCW library. They own all that shit. And you tell me you couldn't provide? You couldn't even provide your own footage from Sting at WrestleMania in San Francisco? Come on, man. That's some petty bullshit. Especially when AEW has made current superstars available to WWE. They made Sting fucking available for documentary. And JR. And I think Danielson as well. Come on, man. I think that's, I don't know. That really does like leave a sour taste in my mouth. And just kind of makes me just despise WWE more. Because they're like the fucking Walmart, right? They're like Disney. They're like Apple. They're the big bad corporation. Making the little guys suffer. I mean, come on. Anyway. I mean, great. I mean, listen. I had to like, I think in some ways I kind of made myself like love that match because I don't know. AEW does these hardcore fucking matches so many damn times, and I get a little tired of that, to be honest. But it was Sting. It played off well. People loved it. The stuff that I read online, people were loving it. People digged it. They didn't give a shit about the type of match that it was. They want to see Sting do what he does best, and the Bucks sold beautifully for them. And say what you want about the Young Bucks, because people have a lot of bad shit to say about them. But when somebody like Sting, fucking Sting, puts them over the way he did in that press conference, that's all I need to hear. I don't need to hear fucking Jim Cornette or Russo or any of these other fucking old men that yell like clouds talk about how bad the Young Bucks are for the wrestling business. It's bullshit. To me, all that matters is what the other wrestlers have to say about their peers. That to me is what should matter. Not what Jim Cornette says, or Eric Bischoff says, or Vince Russo says, or Tom, Dick, and Harry on Twitter. It matters what your actual peers, like a Sting, say about you publicly. Because Sting didn't have to say shit. He doesn't have to say anything. And he can just as easily bury those guys on the way out, but he didn't. He showed them massive respect, and it was his choice to have the Young Bucks as his last opponent in his career. Think about that. Think about that and then come back and talk to me about how the Young Bucks are ruining the business. Darby Allin. Not a fan of that spot at all. It was just too much. And I think it took away from some of the match because you see him fucking plunge through that glass pane. The shit shatters all over the place. If you go back and watch the video I did again today, some woman in the front row right there in the corner gets some of that glass in her face. I don't know what the fuck AEW was thinking with that. That was really like the one negative, big negative of the night was Darby Allin doing that dive like that. I tell you what, it made for a cool visual with his back bleeding the way it did. But I do think it took away from the moment because some people were distracted by the fact that he might have been hurt. My brother's like, is he dead? You know? And I did see people on social media saying, oh, that really took me out of it because I was concerned for Darby when all the attention should have been on the ring and on Sting. But, I mean, what are you going to do? It's Darby Allin. He does shit like this, like he has something to prove. Bro, you got nothing to prove, man. You're a great wrestler. I don't understand why you feel the need to do this stuff in the ring. To me, it doesn't make any sense. I want this man to have a long career, and goddamn, it seems like the expiration date on him might be in like 3 to 5 years. I don't know. Who the hell knows? What do I know? I'm just somebody here with the microphone talking into a microphone. So, I know people were mad about the way the pay-per-view ended with Sting was talking and then they went off the air. Listen, I don't know what you want to do. That paying for that extra half an hour is expensive. It costs a lot of money to do that, to extend pay-per-view time. That's a lot of money. Tony Khan might be a billionaire, but there are limits. And listen, you can go watch what he said on YouTube. I haven't watched that yet, but listen, that is what it is. The bigger question now is what happens to AEW from here on out. They announced a new pay-per-view for next month. Personally, I think it's overkill. I don't think you need to do another spring pay-per-view when you have Revolution, Double or Nothing, and then Forbidden Door happening in late spring and early summer. I did see a lot of people saying that decisions will have to be made for them financially because you're asking people to drop $50 for each of these pay-per-views. And by the way, pay for your fucking content and don't be a fucking teenager and pirate shit. Seriously. We're not teenagers anymore using LimeWire. Somebody somewhere is asking what LimeWire is. So paying that $50 a pay-per-view is fine when you're doing it 4 times a year. But now you're looking at 9 shows a year at $50 a pop. That's $450. That's a lot for some people. And I know people are, I can understand why people are asking for a streaming deal so that you have the WWE model for pay-per-views, but you also have to understand that I feel as though AEW needs to make as much money as possible, and you're going to do that by charging $40 to $50 for your shows. Now, I think what they can do is maybe do the TNA model where TNA now is charging a premium $40 for their major shows, and then those interstitials, those other monthly shows, are only $10. Could you do something like that? Could AEW charge $20 for Dynasty and $20 for Wrestle Dream? I think so. I think you keep the major four at the same price. You do Revolution, Double or Nothing, All Out, and Full Gear, and then maybe you do a package deal for All In and All Out since they're back to back. I think that's only fair. I shouldn't have to pay $100 for 2 shows within a week. Make that $75, $65, $75. I think you're good. So we'll see what happens there. Personally, again, I don't like the fact that they're adding more shows to the mix. I think it's just a little bit of overkill. Just a little bit. I'm going to be curious to see if AEW picks up new viewers this week because it's probably a sure bet that a lot of lapsed wrestling fans ordered Revolution because it was Sting's match. So you hope that some of those people stick around and check out your weekly television show now. They might not necessarily become paying customers, but if you get them in the door, you never know. And I was on Reddit today because I'm trying to do some research about how to better promote the podcast and seeing how I can do that in different Reddits and different subreddits. And this idea, it's accurate. People were saying, I saw at least 4 to 5 people saying, hey, haven't watched wrestling in a while, but, I wanted to see Sting's last match. I loved what I saw during the show. I'm going to tune in Wednesday to Dynamite. That's what you want, man. You want that shit. You want people, and it's smart. Listen, it's smart that they're basically starting this new season on Wednesday. It really was a good call, really a genius call when you think about it. Now, they must have known, I don't know if it's really a stretch, but they must have known that new people were going to be tuning in to the show, and you suck them in, and hopefully you get them to come now to your weekly television, whether it's going to be Dynamite or Rampage or Collision. That's why Sunday was very important. Sunday was a very important pay-per-view for AEW. But it remains to be seen how they are going to take advantage of the extra eyeballs on them. All right. That's going to do it for AEW and for Revolution. And the other pro wrestling related thing that I wanted to talk about has to do with Paul Heyman. He's going into the WWE Hall of Fame. That was announced today. And I know the WWE Hall of Fame is, some people look at it as a farce in some way. There's no physical building, even though that's been discussed so many times in the past. I actually think they should put a physical building in downtown Stamford, right next to the new WWE headquarters, because that would be the ideal spot, because the Metro North station's right there across the street, so people could easily come up from NYC to see the building. That being said, there are people who are inducted into the Hall of Fame that take it very seriously. Eric Bischoff has talked about this on his podcast. While he acknowledges that it's kind of a bit of a farce in some ways, people take this shit seriously. And they should, because it is, again, biggest stage, right? So Heyman going in this year in Philadelphia is probably the biggest no-brainer of no-brainers. He put that city on the map from a pro wrestling perspective with ECW. And he, in some ways, changed the direction of WWF because they had to pivot to the Attitude Era. And they did so not only to compete with WCW, but they knew that this promotion out of Philadelphia was putting a more adult spin on pro wrestling. Key word there being on adult and not this Disney-fied presentation that you get from WWE these days. I think about the wrestlers that came out of ECW that turned out to be some of my faves of all time. The guys that got their real big-time exposure like RVD and Taz and Tommy Dreamer and the Dudley Boys, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, Cactus Jack. Then you had guys like Bam Bam Bigelow that made an impact there as well. And obviously, you had the Austin stint in ECW where he basically found himself in some ways. He found that character. One of the more significant aspects of that promotion is that ECW introduced a lot of American fans to different styles of pro wrestling, which is something that you still see as an influence in AEW and TNA and MLW to this day. So we have Paul Heyman to thank for that. And also, let's not forget the contributions he's made to the product today. I mean, Jesus, some of his promos in WWE are legendary, especially when he was paired with Lesnar. The man has a way with words. I mean, there's no denying that whatsoever. So if you're teaching young wrestlers today about promos, how do you not use Heyman as one of the best examples out there? And I'm sure that's the case at that Performance Center. And wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make trips down there to listen in on promo classes down there. So, yeah, again, I wanted to take time to make sure I acknowledged Heyman because he is an important figure in pro wrestling and, quite frankly, is partly responsible for my fandom today. I remember learning about ECW from friends and then staying up to 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night to watch the show because that was the only time it was on. And then we eventually started ordering the ECW pay-per-views. And me and my buddy Eric went to go see them on back-to-back nights at the Hammerstein Ballroom. It's crazy. That was just the time that we're never going to get back. And the influence of ECW is still being felt today. And that is how you create a legendary status in Paul Heyman. All right. That's going to do it for the pro wrestling side of things. I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to get into some video game stuff. And we are going to start with the journalism PR corner thing because it encapsulates some current video game stuff. And I thought it was a good chance to get that, the corner in, and get the brain dead comment of the weekend. That's making a return this week. So stay tuned. I'll be back right after this. And welcome back to episode 16 of the Nerd Federation podcast with your host, Will Hernandez. Got my water. I had some crackers. I think now I am good to go. And I'll jump right back into it here. I didn't have this segment on the show last week because there wasn't anything out there that really fit. And I'm not going to force this segment in there every week. That's what she said. But something caught my eye this week, and I felt I had to say something. And it fits well into this journalism / PR segment that I did a couple of weeks ago. And I'm going to set the stage for you so you can follow along here at home and understand where I'm coming from with the point that I'm going to make. So, PlayStation VR 2 has become a contentious topic on social media, and really for good reason. I think it's fair to say that there was a lot of hype around PS VR 2, and by all accounts, the technology seems great. I haven't used it, but I've used I've used VR in the past, and I loved my MetaQuest 2. Didn't really use it a lot. That's a different story because I was in a studio and didn't really have the room for it. But I've got the room now for a VR headset. And I think people were very excited that it was getting first-party support with Horizon Call of the Mountain. And I thought that was really great because it was something that I wanted to get. But there was also something that was telling me to hold off, because I wanted to see just how much first-party support the machine was going to get, because the first iteration of PSVR didn't have that. And guess what's happening with PSVR 2? The first-party support isn't there. So I think that's where a lot of this so-called controversy that I saw last week stems from. Now, there have been some prominent critics of PSVR 2, particularly Ryan McCaffrey at IGN. I think Ryan's about as old as I am. I'm 45. He's somewhere there. He's probably in his early 40s. I think him and I graduated around the same time. So he's an old school journalist. I've been following him since he was at the official Xbox magazine from 2002 to 2012, when he jumped ship to IGN and has been there ever since. So the guy's a legend in my mind, and one of the few reasons why I still visit IGN at all these days. So Ryan, like I said, has been critical of PSVR 2 on Twitter. And with him being more of a personality these days on IGN, what he says, I think, carries some weight. There have been a couple of times on Twitter that he's lamented about being disappointed with PSVR 2 because of the lack of first-party PlayStation support. So, of course, the mob comes for him. And the most popular response from the mob is, there's plenty to play on PSVR 2. And guess what? They're right. Right now, there are about 260 titles on the platform. But here's the problem. There are few exclusives to the platform. And a lot of these titles I can either play on my Quest that I have now or other headsets that are out there. And that's the issue here. And that's the issue that Ryan has pointed out time and time again on Twitter. There's so much potential with first party for PSVR 2. We all know that. We all know that the PlayStation Studios make some great games. But outside of Gran Turismo VR and Call of the Mountain, what else is there? I think there is a couple of handful of games out there. And then you make matters worse, PlayStation is closing the London studio, which is primarily dedicated to VR games. So I set this up for you, and this is kind of where this journalism angle comes into play. So on Thursday, there's a very popular Twitter account that covers PSVR. His name it's PSVR 2 without parole. I forget what his actual name is. He's been on the Sacred Symbols podcast. He's been on the Sacred Symbols Plus. So he's been interviewed by Colin Moriarty about the state of PSVR. And also by Dustin Furman, the executive producer. So on Thursday, he tweets out an IGN article that was questioning why PSVR 2 has struggled. And the article was pointing out the issues that were happening right now and what's leading to, quite frankly, poor sales of the headset. I think there was an article somewhere out there that during the holiday season on Amazon that the PSVR was being outsold 30-1 by the Meta Quest headsets. 30-1. Think about that. That's crazy. So PSVR 2's without paroles, God, I just butchered that. I'm going to just say parole. His tweet with the article said this: is it just me, or do games journalists not even understand the industry they're writing about? You're holding PlayStation VR 2 to a higher standard than flat screen gaming. Do better. He mentioned the author, of course, in the tweet. And the replies were a shit show, as they usually are on things like this. So what did I do? I go ahead and read the article. And before I get into that, I will say this, and it's something that I've mentioned on here before. Games journalists these days are in a no-win situation. It's just the nature of the beast. I've discussed before how I'm not a fan of modern-day games journalism. You can go back and listen to episode 5 of the Nerd Federation podcast when I get into the whole thing with the Insomniac leak and about how some outlets refuse to cover the leaks for these morality reasons, which is all a bunch of bullshit. By the way, that episode 5 is my most downloaded podcast episode, which is interesting. Anyway, these game journalists are getting beat up all the time on social media. A lot of it is their own fault, the outlet's fault, etc., etc. But I will give credit where credit is due. I read the article, and it was a fair article. It raised fair questions. I think part of the issue that people had, and you're going to find this fucking shocking, sarcasm, people got upset with the headline, which said, a year since its release, Sony seems to have abandoned PSVR 2. To me, it's an accurate headline for what the story is about. The problem is, and I don't know if this is the case for Parole, that sounds weird, people don't read beyond the fucking headlines. And if you read the comments to Parole's original tweet, people clearly did not fucking read the headline. They clearly didn't. So one comment really got to me, and that's why we're rolling into this week the brain dead comment of the week, because it is really a brain dead comment and shows what's wrong with people's understanding of how journalism is supposed to work. This is his comment. A lot of games journalists seem to have wanted PSVR to die from the outset. Strange behavior. Surely supporting and championing good tech will help sales and thus increase readership. To borrow an old school term, here's a fucking newsflash. Newsflash being the old school term. Journalists are not supposed to be championing anything. They're not. Unless you're an opinion editorial writer. But if you're writing features and you're writing hard news, you're not supposed to be championing anything. There's an old saying for sports journalists: no cheering in the press box. The same thing applies here. And therein lies the problem of the lack of understanding from people. IGN is taking a critical look at PSVR 2 and pointing out legit concerns that people have about first-party support. I've had those concerns since before the thing came out, when it was announced. Because you know what? They did a shitty job of supporting the first one. And the thing that's even funnier is that you read these articles and they are championing the good tech. They're saying it. They're saying it in their reviews and they're saying it in their articles. Yes, it is great technology, but there is a lack of first-party support on the platform. I don't understand why that is so hard for people to understand. And if you read some of the other comments that are there, they're just as brain dead as some of the other comments. Here's another one. This is some strange narrative. There is some strange narrative of hate against Sony and PSVR 2. And of course, there are many things that need to be improved. But when it comes to VR, the hate is only for PSVR 2 and no other headsets. You know why this quote-unquote hate is there? It's because PSVR 2 doesn't have first-party support. Most of the games that are out there on the other platforms most of the games that are out there on PSVR 2 can be played on the other platforms. That's the problem. Sony made it seem like they were going to really support this machine with original first-party games. Games based on their existing IP. They got the right idea with Horizon Call of the Mountain. But where's the Ghost of Tsushima VR game? Where's the God of War VR experience? You can't even fucking play these games in a VR mode. You're not even asking for fucking games from the ground up. There's not even a VR mode to be seen in these games. Meantime, you got Resident Evil as a VR mode. Yeah, Gran Turismo has that. We got that. But then where are the original PlayStation titles? London Studio's gone now. They're going to be gone. So that, where does that leave you? That's the issue here. Sony, as at the end, you can see I'm very passionate about this. Let me backtrack. As of the end of 2023, Sony has sold 50 million PS5s. 50 million. 50 million. You know how many VR headsets that they've sold? It's likely less than 1 million. The last we heard anything official was that it had sold 600,000 units in the first 6 weeks. We haven't had updated figures since then. I wonder why. It's because the platform has fucking bombed. It doesn't matter how great the technology is. People aren't buying it because there's no first-party support. That's the issue here. Don't blame the journalists. That is so fucking silly. You know what the other thing is too? As I was going around, there are plenty of websites that cover VR that are shitting on PlayStation VR 2. They're pointing out the problems to PlayStation VR 2. But because they're smaller websites, they don't go after them. They got to go after the IGNs of the world. And listen, I am all about going after the likes of IGN when it's necessary. But I think in this case, it's unfair. It's an unfair situation. They're doing a public service to people who come to their website, the biggest gaming website in the world, and having a God-honest conversation analysis of the issues with PSVR 2. Go read the fucking article. I'm going to link to it in the script, in the timestamp, so you can go read it yourself, and then come back and talk to me about whether. Come back and talk to me if you're taking a very fair assessment of that article and reading it a couple of times, and then ask me if IGN and that author are being unfair to PSVR 2. Please, go read the article and come back and talk to me. Whew! That's going to do it for... Man, I knocked out 2 segments there. The PR corner, I should say the journalism corner, and the brain dead comment of the week. So, let me talk quickly about Final Fantasy XVI, because I'm still playing that, and I had mentioned how I am gonna go play that when I'm done here. I just wanted to see, let me see if I am logged in to PlayStation right now, because I wanted to kind of see where I'm at. I think I'm at 56% as far as the progress. You know how like you know how PlayStation has the thing with the, you get to see... Okay, I'm not logged in. But I think I'm 26 to 29 hours in, 56% of the way through the main story. So I'm getting there. It's I have to say, listen, I'm enjoying the show. I'm sorry. I'm enjoying the game. I really am. It is unlike anything I have ever played before, and I'm going to get into that reason in a bit. But it's starting to drag a little bit. And this is the problem that I have. Listen, this is the reason why. This is exactly at the heart of what we're seeing right now with this industry, with the layoffs and the thinning margins, is that these games are long. These major games are long. They take a long time to make. And they're not selling as many as they used to. Maybe if you make shorter games, you can sell more copies of your games. I don't know. That's just a thought. So it's dragging a little bit. I mean, I'm going to finish it, obviously. And I'm looking, probably in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have it done. TBD. I should have it done this month. I know because I'm getting long in the tooth with this now. I started playing it, we're talking about like 5 weeks ago. Listen, guys, it takes me a while to get through sometimes these games. I do have a full-time job, and I've got a girlfriend, and I've got other things going on in my life. Sue me. Anyway, the last time I played on Sunday. I played 4 hours. And I've mentioned before how sometimes some of these missions can fucking last like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And Sunday was one of those instances. And I was getting to about like 3:30 in the afternoon. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should stop here and then maybe jump into some Helldivers, because I knew I wanted to start getting myself ready to watch Revolution. So I got to this part that was like a main level in the game, a main mission in the game. I'm like, okay, I'm going to just go ahead and do this. Start doing it. 90 minutes. Keep in mind, I'm not dying. I barely die in this game. Sometimes I wonder if I'm playing this thing the right way, and I've got it on a medium difficulty. Like, it's very weird. I guess I figured out how to use everything I'm supposed to use effectively. There are some really hard battles, but I will say the one that I just did, that I'm going to talk about, I just barely got by. Barely got by. But this battle was like a 3-stage battle. And I'm talking about you had to get the boss's health down all the way down 3 times. And the last time took fucking forever. I think the last boss battle might have took me like a half an hour. No fucking joke. No joke. It took like a half an hour to finish that boss battle. And the scope and the size of the boss battle, like you as a character versus the character that you were fighting, I thought to myself, how is this going to work? Because he starts as a smaller character. And I'm not going to I don't want to get into spoilers. He starts as a smaller character, and then he becomes like, I don't know, the size of like the Empire State Building. I don't know, for lack of a better, that's what it felt like. And I'm just thinking, how the fuck is this going to work? Listen, I've been playing video games for a very long time. You're talking, I don't know, 35 years, maybe a little bit more than that, 36, 37 years. I have never seen a boss battle like that in my life. I've never seen boss battles like this in any video game. It's not just this one. And I'm thinking about, holy shit, what is this last boss battle going to be like? Am I going to have to set it, like 2 hours to finish this thing? Like, seriously, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm getting close. Again, it's getting a little long in the tooth for me, but I'm still enjoying it. Like, I want to see where this story goes. There's so much intrigue. This game is so fucking Game of Thrones like. It is so funny. Like, just some of the language that they use is very Game of Thrones, and some of the tropes is very Game of Thrones. I've mentioned that before, but it always comes up to pass during the game, and I just think, wow, this is the Japanese version of Game of Thrones, honestly. It really is when you think about it. It is the Japanese version of Game of Thrones. I don't know if I'm going to be finished with this next week. I will have something different to talk about next week, because I started playing Dark Forces, Star Wars Dark Forces, the remaster. I've got a lot to say about that. And the good thing about that game is that I have it on the Series S in my office, so I can play that within little breaks at work. And I played it on Sunday for like a half an hour. I got through the first mission, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. But I'm going to save that for next week, so I have something new to talk about. There probably won't be any Final Fantasy XVI talk next week. I've got some serious fucking FOMO right now with all the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth talk. So I got to play the original game first. I have to get that done. That has to happen at some point soon. But I think I'm a little Final Fantasied out right now. Anyway, so Halo TV show. which I will admit, I have not watched the latest episode of the show. But I want to revisit what I said last weekend. I should say last episode. Because I've been trying to... I got into this whole thing with somebody last week because they had somebody had tweeted out a preview of the latest episode. And it was more of the Spartans fighting without their armor on. And I made a comment about it. Let me see if I can pull up what I said. It's a lot of Revolution shit right here. Bear with me. Oh, I did mention it last week. Yeah. I did. That's funny. I thought that I did not talk about this. Let me see something. Because this is... I'm trying to see like the date here. No, this is new. Yes, this is the new part. So they showed the sneak peek. So my reply to this was basically Spartans fighting without Spartan armor. Like, what are we doing here? I enjoyed season 1 for what it was, but season 2 is not the soft reboot I envisioned. Episode 4 kind of broke me. Listen, I'm exaggerating for effect, clearly. That response got 3,300 views and 45 likes. But then I got into this whole thing with somebody on Twitter, and we were going back and forth. And listen, I was trying to be respectful with my responses and what I didn't like until he started being an asshole. And you can go and look at the exchange on my account. And the thing was, the final thing I said to him was, listen, if you want to come on my podcast and debate me about the season, when the season's done, you are more than welcome to. Crickets. Of course, because these people, they hide behind a keyboard, but they probably can't put fucking 2 sentences together on a microphone like I can. I've kind of been surprised by how many people that are big gamers that have said that they're enjoying season 2. And listen, if you're enjoying season 2 of Halo, God bless you. That's okay. That's fine. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I want more people to enjoy it. My girlfriend is enjoying it. I felt like they need to kind of adhere to more of the source material. I mean, come on. I know they're trying to use a fucking storytelling device to tell them why they're not in their armor. I get it. But we're going to go another fucking episode without them in their armor. We've only seen them fight 1 fucking episode. 2, maybe. When they go try to find the missing team on Reach. So they're in their armor the first 2 episodes. And then after that, that's it. I don't know. I didn't see this latest episode 5. But it's just like, my God. I still stand by like, what the fuck are we doing here? I should watch it. I should be able to watch it by the time we reconvene for the next episode, and I should have more to say. But I'm disappointed. I just really am. Anyway, piece of media that I am not disappointed in, and I'm going to give my kind of final quick impressions about Masters of Doom. I think, and I mentioned this last week, if you're a fan of this genre, read this book. It's as simple as that. If you're a video game fan, you should read the book. If you're a history fan, you should read the book. If you're a pop culture fan, you should read the book. Really, you really should, because I think the author does a great job of highlighting the journey of id, the company id. I was going to say id Software. I mean, it is id Software now. It really is. And I'm trying to find, I forget what the author's name is. I just recently followed him on Twitter. David Kushner, who wrote Masters of Doom. Apparently, he also wrote an article, a book about Grand Theft Auto, which I need to fucking read now. Because if he wanted to detail in the way he did with Masters of Doom, I can only imagine what the Grand Theft Auto book is like. I think the biggest thing, I mentioned this too with this book, how a lot of stuff that you saw in the book and read about in the book kind of mirrors what has been going on with the industry today. Bad management leading to extended development cycles and burning through cash because you're wasting away things and not properly managing expectations of the game. It's funny. Some of that, when you read about how Carmack or how Romero started up the Ion Storm Studios, how it took them a year and a half to make the game that ultimately flopped, and they said that took too long. Think about that for a second. And I think I mentioned that last week. It took Rocksteady 8 years to make not Gotham Knights, Suicide Squad. And look how long it took Arrowhead to do Helldivers 2. It took them a really long time. And John Romero was down that it took them a year and a half to get their game out. Like crazy. Crazy. It's crazy to think about that in comparison to what you have today. And the fact that those games were advanced and at the height of kind of the technology that was around back then. And it still only took them a year and a half. Year and a half to make games back then. It's insane. It really is insane. So I highly recommend you going and picking up that book and reading it. Do the audiobook if that floats your boat. I don't think that's the same. I'm never going to think that is the same thing. But I know how people can get with reading versus the audiobooks. And so I moved on to the next book. I'll talk about that very quickly. I'm still early on. I'm reading Metro 2033, which I'm really excited about. Partly because I started playing Metro Last Light a few years back, and I just for whatever reason, I put it down and I never got back into it. So what I want to do is I want to get through Metro 2033. That's my book for March. Again, trying to get through a book a month. Read that, and then hopefully, depending on where I am with some gaming stuff, start playing those games. I don't think they're I'm just trying to see how long it is to beat Metro 2033. Let's see. This is real live journalism here. Let's see. So the Metro games they don't take that long. Like the main story from Metro 2033 takes 9 hours, 9.5 hours. You're looking at 9 to 12 hours really for these games, which is it's not a lot at all. And they remade them. Let me just see. Metro 33 Redux, I think is the remake. There's Metro Last Light Redux. And then you have Metro Exodus, which is a little bit longer of a game. So yeah, at some point I want to get into those games and finish them and play them through. Finish the first one and then play the other two. So yeah, it's very interesting because that book was originally written in Russian, and then it was translated into 35 different languages. And the way the book is, I picked this up recently at a bookstore. You know, when you buy a book, you have like the title page, and you have a little bit of a preface, and you know all the copyright information and the IBN number and all that stuff. That does not exist with this book. It's like open up the cover, chapter 1 starts right there. So that part of it's really interesting. All right. Well, that is going to do it for episode 16. I can't listen. I'm not going to get into. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I'm going to start. There might be some stuff out there that happens this week that you might see on socials that's going to be a little bit different than what I usually do when I share clips. I'm experimenting, so be on the lookout for that. But thanks for joining me. Episode 16, which is crazy that I'm 16 episodes into this thing. And yeah, I was really excited about doing this show because I felt so strongly about Revolution, and I thought it was a great show. And I'll be curious again to see what happens tonight on Dynamite for when you're listening to this. And yeah, I am going to press the stop button here, get this all loaded and ready to go to publish tomorrow, and I'm going to go jump into Final Fantasy XVI, hopefully for a couple of hours. That's going to be the plan tonight before I go to bed. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next week.